Hello, team. Welcome to another ATPGEO politics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a probably another ill-advised live stream since it is now midnight UK time, and this is my probably least prepared of live streams that I've done for a long time. But I just feel there's so much going on. Such an insane day, and unfortunately not in a good way for many reasons. That I thought I'd better come and do a bit of a live and speak to you guys and see how you guys are. Do a bit of a Q&A if you have anything to say and anything to ask, but just go through a few things that I had on my mind. Okay, so let's just move myself over there. I'm going to start by talking to you about, and I will mention this tomorrow in one of my videos tomorrow, but another example of astounding acquiescence to Russia and to Vladimir Putin from the President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, who has said this earlier on today. As they say, Donald, 2 weeks. I like to say 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 week. Trump says he plans to address ending the war in Ukraine next week. You know, a week and a half after he said 2 weeks. So that's good. He revealed that Putin called to wish him a happy birthday. They spoke for about an hour, focusing mostly on the Israel-Iran conflict. Ukraine will be looked at later, Trump said. This is absolutely incredible because he was phoned by Vladimir Putin to wish him a happy birthday. I mean, say what you like about Putin. He knows how to play people, and he knows how to play Trump. There's no two ways about it that Trump, I think, has been played. So, well, this is what Trump says. President Putin called this morning to very nicely wish me a happy birthday. Isn't that nice? I mean, this is a sort of thing you say about your mum phoning you or something. Just absolutely incredible that it would be phrased in this way. There is no doubt in my mind that Trump is in the pocket of Putin. He's putty in Putin's hands. President Putin called this morning to very nicely wish me a happy birthday, but to more importantly talk about Iran, a country he knows very well. We talked at length. Much less time was spent talking about Russia, Ukraine, but that will be for next week. He is doing the planned prisoner swaps. Large numbers of prisoners are being exchanged immediately from both sides. The call lasted approximately 1 hour. He feels, as I do, this war in Israel-Iran should end, to which I explained his war should also end. I mean, nice ending there to that, but my goodness, incredible stuff. Right. What can we make of this? Well, Iran is a concern for Putin. As I mentioned earlier in one of my videos, Russia did a bilateral agreement with Iran just recently, a few months back. And although it doesn't, I think, go as far as the bilateral agreement that Russia did with North Korea, which is very similar to NATO Article 5, meaning that each country goes to the other country's aid if they are invaded, hence why Russia was able to kind of legally or via the piece of paper that they've written, he was able to call on the North Koreans to come and help him. That's not the case with Iran, and I can imagine that Putin is thanking his lucky stars that he didn't write that kind of similar agreement, because otherwise you can imagine Russians being pressured to go and help Iran. But Russia are in quite a difficult position with Iran because they are allied to Iran. Israel is absolutely battering Iran, and they're doing that tonight, and we will go on to this later. And that puts him in a difficult position. And the good outcome for Russia at the moment is the oil price is going up. And tonight we see that Israel are targeting oil facilities as well. So the price of oil will shoot up, and that will massively benefit Russia. It's going to be happy about that. But it looks like the United States is, even though I don't think Trump was particularly happy about not knowing that Israel were going to strike Iran, and that lack of awareness will undoubtedly annoy Trump. But he's very good at shouting kind of post hoc rationalization. So after the fact, rationalizing how this is good for the US, how he was somehow responsible for the successes Israel are achieving militarily. So you might see a bit of a change of approach from Trump to go from diplomacy, because he really wanted his Nobel Peace Prize, to getting behind Israel and maybe more formally helping with munitions and planes, even with hitting Iran. We're going to come back to this because I think it's super interesting what might happen in Iran. Some of the rumors that are circulating with regard to people sort of running away. But anyway, that statement from Donald Trump, I think, is hugely disturbing. And you start piecing all these aspects of foreign diplomacy concerning Russia and the US and Russia, you start piecing all these dots together, all these jigsaw pieces together, and you start coming to a very disturbing conclusion that, as we've said many times, the US is compromised in some way, or I say the US, the Trump administration. This is seemingly well, another piece of the jigsaw might well be this, and loads of people are talking about this. This isn't just me picking this out. This is all over the internet at the moment. So the US has, or the White House has said, what's is this? That's the Department of Defense, right? So Department of Defense has said it is Flag Day, and they've got the stars and stripes on the right here, but they've got the Russian tricolor either side of a couple of stars just below Flag Day. And there are so many people going, that's literally the Russian flag in the post, two of them. The Department of Defense saying, Happy Flag Day, let us honor the emblem of our nation and the stars and stripes that unite us as we display our nation's flag and reflect on the values, blah, 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 blah. And just everyone's going, you what? Are you kidding me? Russian flags on this? Julia Davis here, a bit on the nose, don't you think? So many people are talking about this. This isn't just me like being difficult, contrarian. Crazy. I don't know if you can make anything particularly about that, but aren't these things passed through any kind of vetting process where someone goes, yeah, looks a bit like another flag I know. Probably not worth doing that. I don't know. So that moves us on to the parade, and I'm not going to spend too long on the parade. There's a military parade today, which is a real coincidence that it's Trump's birthday as well. Who knew? It looks a little bit like Trump wants to be a dictator. So he wants his military parade, and he wants this to be connected, I think, to his birthday. I mean, there's no coincidence that it's the 250th birthday of the American Army, the US Army, and also Donald Trump's birthday, or they've held it on this particular day. Why is the media not covering that Trump's parade has a very, very small crowd? No one really showed up. I don't know if this was taken somewhat before the event, but this is definitely doing the rounds. A video here showing that the parade was actually, so it started early, the parade, and some of the parachutists that were coming down were half an hour early because the weather is supposed to be so inclement that actually it's a bit of an issue. So they've had to push a bunch of stuff forward. But it is seemingly fairly undersubscribed, this parade. and you've got lots of images of Marco Rubio yawning. It seems, I mean, I could play you this. This won't have the sound on for you, but you've got the crowd singing happy birthday to Donald Trump here before they sing the national anthem, and it all just seems a bit culty to me. And I wanted to remind you of this, which is what Donald Trump said on the hot mic, but he actually said it publicly as well, somewhat after this. This is a famous hot mic incident where he and I think this is so perfect for today. I'm going to play it to you. So here we go. Present, share this screen. There you go. And I know I've played this to you plenty of times before, but listen to it again. It is pretty incredible.
Are we close to seeing Mr. Kim here at the White House?
Could happen. I mean,
they talked about that yesterday with Mike Pompeo?
Yeah, I think it's something that could happen. Yeah. Hey, he's the head of a country, and I mean, he is the strong head. Don't let anyone think anything different.
Right.
He speaks, and his people sit up at attention. I want my people to do the same.
Well,
so he said, talking about King Jong-un, could Kim come to the country? Say he could too. Look, he's the head of a country. He's a very strong man. You know, when he speaks, the people sit up straight. I want my people to do that. You know, I want my people to treat me like King Jong-un is treated by his people. I want this country, essentially, I think he's really implying, I want this country to be like North Korea in the way that I am given this kind of adulation by my people. Just absolutely incredible that that he said that, and that was caught on a hot mic, and then he went and said it on camera to a news crew. So yeah, I thought it was worth reminding us of that. And you had this military parade, birthday parade, etc., etc., and at the same time, you have these extraordinary protests right throughout the country for the No Kings, protests that are going on right throughout the United States. So I think, you know, joining that together, the parade for his birthday, the authoritarian ICE apprehensions on the roadside without due process, the desire, and we heard this again today, for the Trump administration to get rid of habeas corpus, which is the right that people have to have a legal defense, essentially. So you can't just whisk people off the streets and then disappear them. If the Trump administration wants to get rid of that, then that is embracing authoritarianism. So all of this kind of movement towards an authoritarian scenario in the United States is being met finally by some real mobilization on the streets and in the cities. Just some extraordinary footage today of huge protests, and I wonder whether this is being overshadowed somewhat by parade, Iran and Israel, the shooting in Minnesota, which we're going to come to. We're going to talk about all these aspects, but this is part of what signifies today being a crazy day. Is you've just got these huge protests of people coming out on the streets, and this is not something we saw under Joe Biden. I mean, this is a massive mobilization of people. That was in footage that was in Chicago. This is in New York, Madison Square Park. The march is headed downtown to Madison Square Park, but Fifth Avenue is so jam-packed, it's moving at a snail's pace. Just huge crowds, absolutely phenomenal crowds all over the shop, showing the level of discontent with what Donald Trump is doing. This is in San Diego, roughly 170,000 people. Local organizers estimate there were over 20,000 people who attended the protest. 170,000 people in San Diego are illegal immigrants, says this person. I don't know. I can't check those numbers, but anyway, 20,000 people. They're out on the roads. here we have more startling images of huge crowds amassing in a whole number of places. That's going back to Chicago. This, oh, I forget where that is. That Philadelphia? I can't quite remember. New York City again, just absolute huge throngs of people. So many placards. You've got Handmaid's Tale, Gilead. We, the people, we're not meant to kneel. And so there are different elements to people's protesting today. This will be about women's rights and about, you know, the worry about, you know, Roe versus Wade. Obviously, not during Trump's administration, but that was under Trump's picks really for the Supreme Court. That took place. So this I find this one interesting. I think this is reference to Pussy Riot, who are a Russian band who are anti Putin band. And here you have a number of people. I don't know where this is, but their banner says it's beginning to look a lot like Russia, which I think pretty much says it all there. Then we have someone here saying, I'm floored. This is one stretch of one side of the street in a deep red small town, Knoxville, Tennessee today. This is a city that Trump won in 2024 by 20 plus points. Scope of these protests are massive. American from both sides of the aisle are not happy. There will be no kings. So really the question is, are these protests completely partisan? So they're just 100% Democrats. Are they Democrats and independents? Are they Democrats, independents, and some Republicans? You know, what is the mix of discontent? What is a makeup of the discontent in the United States? We know from consistent surveys that Trump's popularity at the moment is tanking, and that even he's underwater on immigration, which is his kind of signature policy. So I would imagine there will be at least some Trump voters, people who voted for Trump in the last election, that are now not too happy. But the question is, you know, how much do these protests eat into the independents and Republicans in order for this to have a meaningful effect on elections going forward and the midterms in November? Yeah, almost no Republicans at mine. It'd be interesting how you would know that. But yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. And you know, I could imagine that this is a case of a lot of Democrats, but also looking at some of the polling on independents recently, he is in trouble with a lot of independent voters. Here we've got the No King's Day protesters officially reaching Mar-a-Lago in the shadow of Trump's golden fortress. It says here the people are marching loud, defiant, and done bound to billionaires who think they're above the law. Palm Beach just sent a message: "We're done. We don't crown criminals. We indict them." Strong rhetoric, but you know, again, the same questions would remain. But certainly the turnout is pretty good. And then here we go. Yeah, so Minnesota. So this is our segue onto the next section. So despite warnings from law enforcement not to attend today's No Kings rally after the morning shooting of Minnesota lawmakers with the killer on the loose still, the No Kings rally is happening at the Minnesota State Capitol in St. Paul. And that's really good that they kept up with that. There's a nice placard here in honor of our beloved Melissa. So one of the lawmakers there, the representative, Melissa Hortman, I think it was killed, and her husband was killed as well. So I've done several breaking news updates on that. In fact, the next one I better change. Sorry, I've got to put this on a different browser so that you can hear the audio. There is developing, well, as you'd imagine, emerging information coming out as the day progresses. We now know that the suspect is a chap called Vance Luther Butler, and actually now we're beginning to get a bit more of an understanding of who he might actually be. And it looks like, where there were claims initially that he was, because he'd been appointed by 2 successive Democrat governors to this kind of business development position, people saying, well, he's therefore a Democrat, and therefore, and then you had the online ecosystems and from both sides going absolutely mental at each other, and so many people were claiming this is a progressive left-wing guy doing this. But then if he had a list of 70 people that he was, one presumes, going to shoot, as was suspected, so his vehicle, most of you will know the details now, but when they went to the second house, the house of the second lawmaker, because they'd already known that the other lawmaker was shot. I think it might be in Hortman's first, then they went to Hoffman's, or it might be vice versa. But anyway, they got to the second lawmaker's house, and he was there. He was just coming out, and then they had a gunfight, and then he ran away, but left his vehicle there. So the vehicle, which was kind of a fake police vehicle, and he had his fake policeman's uniform on, had in No King's Flyers, but also had a manifesto apparently, and a list of people, 70 names. And there are rumors it had people like Ilhan Omar, loads of progressive people, Tim Walz, and even abortion clinics and things like that. So it was, the rumors then started shifting from him being some kind of left-wing activist who was killing them because they voted against free medical aid for illegal immigrants, even as Democrats they did. So the theory was this was a left-wing progressive who was killing them because of that, but it didn't make sense out of any of the other data. Then we are starting hearing things like this.
We even asked about Mr. Bolter's political affiliations, and David Carlson, once again his roommate and best friend, known him since 4th grade, did say Bolter voted for Trump and that he was a strong supporter. We even asked.
So it's looking like he was a strong Trump supporter and a registered Republican, and voted for Trump in the last election. So this is I think important to, well, in fact, I'll just show you this as well. So we know he is religious from his kind of LinkedIn profile, and also I think from Facebook, before it was taken down, there were different organizations that he was following, and some of them were really like anti-abortion Christian organizations, real campaigning organizations. So you then start building up a picture that, yeah, this guy ain't going to be some kind of progressive. And then, now you're starting, as people are doing deep dives into the internet to find out what they can about him. Here's an example of, like, this doesn't necessarily implicate him in other ideologies, but you're thinking the probabilities become a little bit higher.
And I'm just as excited about Jesus.
Et je suis juste excité
right
de
here,
Jésus.
right now.
Jusqu'à présent, même maintenant.
And when I get excited,
Et quand je suis excité,
I want to dance.
je veux danser.
And what Jesus did for me.
C'est que Jésus a fait pour moi.
Jesus is God.
Jésus est
Almighty
Dieu.
God.
C'est le Dieu
He
puissant.
saved my life.
Il a sauvé ma vie.
Woo! I'm excited about God.
Je suis excité de Dieu.
And I want to worship Him.
Et c'est pourquoi je l'adore.
Because He's coming again.
So on and so forth. And I don't want to make this a religious thing, but you start saying, okay, like, is this the sort of guy that is going to be campaigning, is going to be like killing Democratic lawmakers because they haven't voted for medical provision for illegal immigrants? Is this the sort of guy, if it's rumored that he has he has abortion clinics on his kind of kill list or whatever. You know, I think this kind of confirms that rather than disconfirms it. It certainly sits alongside that evidence to go towards the conclusion that this guy probably is an anti-democrat kind of guy, so on and so forth. So it's looking like actually this guy was aligned to sort of Trumpism and was likely sitting in that kind of area. And yeah, it's just so sad that we are seeing in the United States a political landscape where there is so much division, there's so much polarization. I mean, I've written heaps on polarization in the American political landscape for the last, I don't know, 10 years, and it is getting worse and worse. And your political identity seems to be one of the biggest driving forces, the biggest sense of tribalism. I think that's generally the case in most places in the world, but it's become more and more so. And the problem is with the United States is you've got a two-party system, so you're lumped into one pot or the other, and that doesn't really do a very good job of representing the broad spectrum of human nature and beliefs and political ideologies that will exist in any country. And so everyone's forced into one of two pots, and then it just feeds a tribalism, like this duopoly of ideology. Just means there's no other option, and so I just think it helps to polarize a society. So I really do hope at some point that the US becomes a multipolar, a multi-party country with much more representation for the electorate, because at the moment, you know, it's like in for a penny, in for a pound. Well, you know, I sort of agree with this party slightly more than I agree with that party, so I'm going to vote for this party, and because there is no other option. But actually, a large amount of this agenda is not something I agree with, but then you lumped into that, and then it becomes your identity, and then yeah, I do. Yeah, somebody saying here, Brian Taylor Cohen gave a good speech in LA. I am aware he gave a fiery speech, and I would definitely like to see that. So yeah, it does seem that your man here is Vance Luther Bolter is probably a Republican Trumpist who has shot and injured two people in Minnesota, and I think that's just so sad, and is a real reflection, I think, of the state of play in the United States. So then you are going to wonder what the reaction is going to be if this is the case from the Trump administration, because that's a bitter pill to swallow. It's, you know, Trump went through his own assassination attempts, and they were, I think, hoping to capitalize on that in terms of it's going to be some kind of left-wing nut job, and it didn't end up being that. Like the kid who shot him and clipped his ear was basically, he had Joe Biden on his list, and his parents ended up being, I think, Trump voters in the end. And it all kind of like, you heard nothing more about that kid because it was uncomfortable for the Republicans to talk about that kid anymore, because it didn't fit in with this kind of narrative of partisan politics. Whereas this does, but it's really uncomfortable if this is true, if my synopsis is true. It's really uncomfortable for Trump and the Republicans. And it's going to be fascinating to see how Fox News and see how Trump and the administration deal with this. If it is true that he is a religious Trumpist, then they're going to try and bury this. But it's appalling, because this guy has gone and tried to kill two lawmakers, successfully killing one of them, and killed the spouse of that lawmaker as well. It's just, it's horrific. And then this will then feed into political divisions. This will bring about further polarization. Then you're going to have gun control back on the agenda, and it's going to be the same old situation where nothing happens, of course, with gun control. But yeah, I just, this is not healthy at all in any way for the US political landscape, and of course that's with the backdrop of this growing discontent for what many people believe is an autocratic leader. It's just a real, it's a boiling broth of political discontent at the moment, and goodness me, there needs to be some unification of people in the United States. It is a very disunited states at the moment. Yeah, this is kind of my opinion. So Janice Burgess says, "You're right. I have no party at this time, so I'm an independent. It looks like the independents are growing more and more." Actually, that's really interesting. So, so this is statistically true as well. So if you look at the data, then what Janice says is on point there, because more and more people are becoming independents, registering as independents. It depends how it's set up in different states. There is no set platform, as it's basically for those who are neither party. Yeah, and I know quite a few of my viewers are like that. You know, from what I've gathered. Okay, so now we're going to move on to, and you know, have any questions, by the way, guys, like throw them in there, and I'll try and get to them at some point if I can see them. But yeah, no questions so far particularly. Yeah, exactly. You know, the US needs a real democracy, not a two-party system. Two-party systems, the narrowest form. So not only do you have a first-past-the-post voting system, which is particularly unrepresentative, there are some advantages of the first-past-the-post voting system, but it's not particularly representative, particularly nationally. So in the UK, for example, you know, the Green Party traditionally, I know they've got 5 MPs now, but in the previous election, what was it? Sort of 1.8 million votes for 1 MP, because all those votes are spread throughout the country. And it was the same for UKIP before they became the Brexit Party and then Reform. And I'm no UKIP fan, but they were democratically underrepresented because of our first past the post voting system. So at the time, they had 4 million votes and no MPs, and then 1 MP because he defected from the Conservative Party to UKIP. But actually, they didn't get any voted in. So you could argue 4 million votes for no MPs, but okay, 4 million votes for a single MP, whereas up in Scotland, they're getting 56,000 votes for an SNP member of parliament. So there's a complete disparity in how many votes it takes to get someone elected, and there's no representation for these people. Well, there's very little representation for these people throughout the country. And that's exactly the case, the same in the US, where you've got first past the post voting system. That can often mean that you can get voted in with not even 50% of the vote. And then especially if you've got third parties, I know I said there's only a 2-party system. There are third parties, but they're just not established parties or independents or whatever. You know, and the Green Party in the US isn't serious. So you got a first past the post voting system, and then you got just 2 main parties. Like, you can't get any more, you can't get any narrower than that as a democracy. So I find it quite funny sometimes when people say that the United States is the beacon of democracy in the world, and actually it's really not. Like, from a mechanistic point of view, from the mechanics of democracy and elections, actually the United States isn't really a beacon of democracy, and it's just very, very narrow indeed. Okay, so I'm not sure about this, Kevin. I don't know enough about this. That all was from George Washington Farewell Address in 1796 about political parties. I don't know what you're referring to there, but I might have to go and do some learning about George Washington. Right. Okay. So let's now step over to Iran. I hope I'm making sense. It's very late here. It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm sipping on my white port because that's how cool I am. And I have MS, and I'm tired. And when I'm tired with MS, my brain just farts, and my grasp of language deteriorates exponentially. So I apologize if my brain is not functioning right. So then we're going to go to Iran. We have, well, here actually we're going to go to Israel. So Iran here hitting Israel with ballistic missiles tonight. And I just wanted to show you this, just to show you how freaking fast ballistic missiles are, how steep they are. Look at the trajectory there. If I can just... Right, look at that. So look at how steep that is, and look at how fast that is. Like, how do you shoot that down? This is so difficult to shoot down. Now, some of these are being shot down in the atmosphere because they have something called THAAD, THAAD, that can shoot these ballistic missiles down. Right. But so the trajectory of a ballistic missile is parabolic, very, very, very much like a bell curve, whereas a cruise missile flies very low altitude, and you can kind of move it, and it can turn around and do different things. Whereas a ballistic missile, you kind of plug it in and fire it off. But the speed at which it travels makes it particularly difficult to shoot down. And then if you do shoot it down, it's still going to, if you shoot it down fairly close to where it's going to land, then it's still going to cause all sorts of trouble down where it lands. So these are really difficult to shoot down. And Israel have one of the best air defense systems in the world, the Iron Dome, and all these different ways of shooting them down, or shooting different targets down, different munitions down. But Israel is a relatively small country, right? And that's why Iron Dome can work. It's very difficult to take that idea and apply it to, say, the United States, as Trump wants to do with the Golden Dome. It would have to look very, very different to this. Now, you could export the Iron Dome to somewhere like Kiev, for example. You can say, right, we want to protect a very small area, so we're going to have this Iron Dome set up there. But as far as using that on the whole country of Ukraine, for example, you just couldn't do it. It's not fit for purpose. But even in Israel, where they've got enough interceptors and they've got all these different air defense systems, Iran are still able to get the ballistics through because they're so difficult to shoot down. I mean, you look at this one as well. It's got a slightly shallower trajectory there, but it is, goodness me, I mean, that's moving really quickly. You're not shooting that down easily, and Iran are going to be getting quite a few ballistic missiles through. But Israel today have been very active, and I think they essentially have some kind of impunity across the Iranian skies to be able to just continually hit Iran. I think Iran might be in a bit of a... It's interesting that Netanyahu said that there's a kind of pathway to Tehran. I don't quite know what he means there, like a physical pathway for an army now that's been created due to the fact that there is such a weakness in air defenses, in their air forces. They've hit air bases today, and yesterday they've hit radars and they've hit air defense systems. The Iranians are in a spot of bother. So here we've got fire caused by Israeli Air Force airstrikes. They're now hitting oil depots. This one's in Shahran, located to the west of Tehran. It's still spreading and has already reached other fuel storage tanks. According to available data, there are at least 11 such storage tanks. Here you've got, Israel is wrecking Iranian oil. That may well be another site. Now, somebody says that, hey, is this good for Ukraine? Or asks. No, it's not. So the hitting of oil depots and refineries is good if you're Israel, but if you're Ukraine, you're looking at this and thinking this is going to absolutely send the price of oil skyrocketing, because you're suddenly, well, you've got the futures markets and stuff like that, but you're just going to be cutting supply off, and that means that the price is going to go up, supply and demand. Just incredible images of these flaming oil refineries and depots. But yeah, it is going to help Russia, because as soon as that oil price goes up, they're suddenly making money on their exports, and they're able to fund the war. It's just as simple as that. Now, what else do we have? So lots of explosions. Here's another powerful explosion. This one in Karaj, major city near Tehran. I think Israel are just, picking their targets and going for it. They're probably only limited just by the amount of missiles they can fire at any one time and their stockpiles of missiles. But I'm fairly sure they've done a really good job of debilitating the Iranian air defenses and air force, that they can just have free reign. And there are rumors that there were prominent Iranian families leaving. Oh my goodness, look, that's an Iranian ballistic missile slamming down, so they are getting through. But there are rumors, in fact, if I find this here, so Iranian oops, no, it helps if I can type Iranian families. I don't know if these are, no, yes, this one. So I don't know how verified this is, but the families of Iranian regime officials are fleeing Iran. This is the beginning of the end. So this is what we saw in Syria. Now, if this is true, and apparently they're flying to Russia, and I would love, videos being altered, the original uploaded in June 20. Yes, so that is not true. So I'm not really sure about this claim. But if that is something you do see, like if that genuinely is something that happens, then that's the beginning of the end for the Iranian regime, I would think. And if you've got a regime change, and that's kind of incredible outcome for what has happened here. And then there is talk that Israel are wanting a regime change. It is on the cards. And so you could get to a point where this didn't look like it was going to happen remotely like 2 weeks ago, just like as in the case with Syria. And then suddenly, out of the blue, it happens. And you could imagine a scenario where the US are sensing this, and it's a bit like, you smell blood, the pack coalesces, and there's an injured antelope, and then they all pile on. Well, the US could well go, they could read the room and go, the Iranians are in an awful lot of trouble. We can help put the nail in the coffin for Iran, and then Trump can wallow in the adulation of helping to be the end of the Iranian theocratic regime. And yeah, that I could imagine that could be an outcome here. I mean, when you look at this, is from 7 hours ago, right now, 8 hours ago. This is Intel Schizo with an updated list of all the people who have been eliminated at the top of the Iranian regime military hierarchy, as well as scientists. I'm not going to read it out to you particularly. I mentioned, Commander-in-Chief of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, Chief of General Staff, Advisor to Supreme Leader, Commander of the Central HQ, Commander of the Aerospace Force, the head of the IRGC Aerospace Air Defense Command, head of the IRGC Drone Forces, Chief of Staff of the IRGC, Deputy Minister of Intelligence, Deputy Chief of Operations, son of Major General Gholam Rashid, a former Deputy Commander of the Quds Force, Political Deputy of the IRGC, a Commander, a Base, Military Advisor to the General Staff, Senior Commander, IRGC Western Command, Deputy Head of the AEOI Professor. So now, then you get on to all the scientists, and then there's just a whole bunch of scientists there. Just absolutely incredible. And there are names that keep getting added to this. So I was just looking about an hour ago, and there were several more to. In fact, if I bring up, I don't know if these are people that were included in that list, but just a couple of hours ago, here you got a deputy chief of intelligence of the aerospace forces. Then you've got another couple just down here, if I remember correctly. Yeah, most important figure after someone else was killed in an Israeli attack a short time ago. So some other guy, I don't know who he is. Chief of staff, second in command of the Houthis. My goodness, so that's in Yemen, in an Israeli strike in I mean, gee whiz. So anyway, lots of people are being struck off, and that's an awful lot of people with an awful lot of experience and knowledge you're suddenly going to have to replace, and that's going to cause you complete chaos as well. So these are the decision makers in how to defend against what Israel is doing, and suddenly they've disappeared. That will mean that Iran are in a much worse position to be able to defend Iran against Israel, which will then, it's like a vicious cycle for Iran. And Israel would just do better and better. And you can imagine the US is looking at this going, gee whiz, this is insane. Now, let's not get confused with, I'm not a fan of Israel when it comes to an awful lot of stuff. Say activities in Gaza, I think are absolutely despicable. And I think there's been genocide there. But if we just park that, we consign that to a moral black box, and just think about this from a kind of military or geopolitical point of view of like, what do I want? So I'm not going to speak for you or anyone else. What do I want for the future of the world? Well, I don't want theocracies. I think theocracies are problematic, where you have religious, effectively religious dictatorships. I think that is not good for democracy, obviously, and it's not good for freedom, and it's not good for women's rights, and it's not good for education, and it's not good for all sorts of things, right? So, I don't want that to be the state of play for Iran. I would like a regime change, and I think it's an autocratic, problematic country and regime. And that kind of regime is trying desperately to develop nuclear capabilities. And the more nuclear nations there are in the world, so at the moment, what is it? It's the US, UK, France, India, Pakistan, China, Israel. Is that right? Are there any more? But basically, it's just a game of probability. The more nuclear nations you have, the higher the chance you have of a nuclear war. It's just simple maths. And so, and especially if those nations taking on nuclear capabilities are dictatorships, where it takes only a very small centralized group of people, very few people indeed, to do something nuts. Whereas that's not really the case for a country like the United States. So we don't want Iran to have nuclear weapons. And if they are enriching, as it appears that they really have been, uranium to a really critical point, then something needs to be done about that. Well, it was happening diplomatically under Obama with was it JPSCO or whatever it was, the Iranian nuclear deal. But Trump came along in Trump 1.0 and ripped that up, and was trying to replace it with his own diplomatic agreement. But then the Israelis just went and did this. Now we can ask about whether that was right, but if we're kind of outcome led, what I mean, like, if we're trying to work out if something is good or bad, that's a moral question. It depends what your moral framework is. And as I've said to you many times, there is moral consequentialism as one way of doing moral philosophy, and that means that that's defined by the consequences of an action. And there are different ways of working this out and different ways of interpreting this. But broadly speaking, the consequences of an action are what derives the morality of that, especially if that's what you intended. So if you're intending to take out Iran's nuclear capabilities by doing all this, and you do it in as humane a way as possible, and by that I mean you're not just blowing up cities and killing, you know, huge numbers of innocent civilians. If you're doing it in a very targeted way, then, you know, this is a good outcome for the world, carried out by the Israelis, who are otherwise doing some pretty crazy stuff over there. But let's just look at this on its own merits, and actually I think this is a benefit for the world. It might be a different evaluation if Iran decides to do something completely nuts, but actually that they don't have nuclear capabilities means they're less able to do something completely nuts. Now there is talk that they would shut down there's a very thin strait just that goes into the, was it Cape of I forget the name of it. You'll say it in the live chat, I'm sure. But if they shut that down, then that's going to screw up trade for the United States, as well as the rest of the world, and that could then start getting the US involved. Yeah, I don't know. Let's go and look at Iran map. Okay, maps, there we go. So here we go. So just over here you've got this strait here, and they are claiming there was a Iranian MP that was saying that they're considering closing that down. If they close that down, then that causes a real serious problem for all sorts of hydrocarbons exports and whatnot. And so that's actually, even though you think, oh, it's only going up there, surely it can't have that much of an impact, but actually yes it will. So if they close that down, then a lot of people are going to be unhappy with that, and then you can see the Americans get involved. You can't see that, so that makes absolutely, I'm talking about here, Hormuz. Yeah. So yeah, if they close that down, that causes a big problem for shipping and trade and hydrocarbons and all sorts, and then the Americans might get involved. And if you have the Americans getting involved, then you know you might have massive regional instability. But then it might be a case where places like Saudi Arabia are thinking, actually, you know, those are Shia Muslims, and we're not too friendly with them. So you know, so be it. And if it's, you know, everyone likes to back the winner, right? And if it looks like Iran are going down a pan militarily, and their regime is going to collapse, then you can imagine that many other countries who might otherwise be upset if things were much lower level and shout about things and be unhappy with the US getting involved and Israel doing this. But if it gets to this critical point where Iran's teetering on the edge of completely losing it, then people might just be a little bit quieter, you know, concerning their criticism. So it really could get to that point. I mean, it's fascinating how successful Israel have been in just a couple of days, and we'll have to wait to see, you know, what a week brings. You've already had Netanyahu saying that, you know, this could go on for 2 weeks type thing, and if it does, you know, 2 weeks of the last couple of days will be completely crippling for Iran, absolutely crippling. So this happened fairly recently, just a couple of hours ago. Israeli Air Forces struck the central bunker of Iran's Armed Forces General Staff in Tehran using bunker buster bombs. And then you've got Trump coming out and saying we remain committed to a diplomatic resolution to the Iran nuclear issue. My entire administration has been directed to negotiate with Iran. Of course, one of the major negotiators has been killed. They could be a great country, but they first must completely give up hopes of obtaining a nuclear weapon. Thank you for your attention on this matter. Yeah, I have a feeling that Trump will just, you know, read the room, read the tea leaves, and go really hard on Iran and support Israel, probably a lot more than he might otherwise have done. I think this came as a surprise, but I reckon the more war hawkish people in the Trump administration will be pretty happy with seeing what Israel have achieved. Oh dear, Trump is giving a fascist speech. Doesn't surprise me. I'll have to check that out and talk about that tomorrow. Yeah, mainly oil and LNG traded. Yeah, across the area I was talking about there. So yeah, okay. So just a few thank yous, Kevin Force. Thank you very much, my good man. Always good to have your support. Thank you for this support for a late night one. Here's a little something towards some Ukrainian wine. Actually, I need to get a restock on that. So thank you, BME. That's very kind. In the meantime, I'm just going to have a little swig of white port. Thank you. Goose Springsteen. If this keeps up for weeks, as indicated, might it get to the point that the US feels compelled to strike deep targets Israel can't? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Why leave a job half finished? Also, ethically, do you think the scientists are legitimate targets? Ha ha! What a question. Probably. If they're genuinely involved in developing, yeah, because this is about weapons. So these are, when we think of scientists, we think people in white coats, right? And they're just doing stuff for the knowledge of humanity. But actually, a scientist in this case is someone who is manufacturing a weapon of mass destruction. So this is, killing a nuclear scientist. Correct me if you think I'm wrong, but killing a nuclear scientist would be similar to destroying an arms factory, which most people, if you're involved in war, don't have a problem with. When we report that this arms factory in Russia has been hit and that one's been hit by the Ukrainians, then we're like, yeah, that's absolutely right. They should be hit. You want to stop them being able to make that stuff. And I think the people who work in those factories, like, you would want to minimize the death of civilian workers, but actually they are part of the war machine that is raining death down on the Ukrainians, right? In the case of Russia and Ukraine. Now, I would say nuclear scientists is way above like someone working in an arms factory in terms of being crucial. Like, if someone working on the floor in an arms factory, stuffing explosives into a shell, someone like that, like the success of say Russia in providing arms for their forces to kill Ukrainians is not contingent upon that person. Like, that job can be done by pretty much anyone, but a nuclear scientist is not a job that can be done by anyone. And so the development of nuclear weapons is contingent upon particular people, and that makes them even more different to people working in the military industrial complex more generally. But that's just my stream of consciousness answer to that, Goose. Great question. Thank you for that. I love a good philosophical question. Ignis, thank you. I would be curious, if Russia does get involved in Iran, would it sour relations between Trump and Putin? Yes, and this is what's super frustrating about Trump, is he just seems to be just an idiot, just an absolute idiot. But actually, like, MAGA supporters of Trump, there must just be huge amounts of cognitive dissonance going on, because Iran, they're the bad guys, yeah, Israel, the good guys, yeah. Typical kind of, particularly in the MAGA Judeo-Christian right, where Muslims are bad and Iran are Muslims, and therefore, yeah, you get that added layer to it. But at the same time, they're kind of championing Putin's kind of traditional conservatism in Russia, and they're anti-Ukraine for whatever reason. And it's just like, you should surely clearly see that these guys are allies, and it's very difficult to hate Iran but like Russia. It's like North Korea, I was hoping would have an effect on people, because if North Korea were coming and sending troops to help Russia, everyone pretty much agrees that North Korea are the bad guys, apart from Trump, who keeps talking about how wonderful Kim Jong-un is. But most normal people, even MAGA Republicans, would acknowledge that North Korea are bad. So I think that point should have been sold far more overtly to the particularly American public there. But yeah, like I think that there should be a tension. Yet he's just had a nice happy birthday call with Putin, Trump, and they've talked lovingly about how they're going to solve this Iran problem. But yeah, Iran and Russia have just signed a freaking military agreement. Just it beggars belief. Like, for you and I hope. But for me, like, if I was prime minister of the UK, it's obvious. Like, Russia the bad guys, Iran the bad guys. Iran, get on with Russia. That's obvious because they're both bad guys. Iran, get on with Russia and get on with North Korea. Yeah, they're bad guys. And then we got China. Oh, that's a bit of a problem. How do we deal with that one? They're a bit of an economic behemoth, and we need to play that one a bit smart. That's obviously how we all think, or should think. And yet here you've got, Vlad is so lovely, and yet we want to screw over Iran. So yeah, I hope it will cause further would cause relations between those two to sour. That's what should happen. But with Trump, you just can't tell. Goose, thank you, matey. Would be amazing for Iran to become more secular. Yes, yes, yes. It's amazing when you see these old pictures of there's that famous image of those Iranian schoolgirls in like 1970 whatever. This is probably going to return a really dodgy search. I'm searching for Iranian schoolgirls, school children, probably I should put. It's no. It's from the 70s. There's a really famous it's like 19. I forget what school children we put in that. No. Dang. 1970s one. Anyway, there's a really famous one that you got this idea of what school is like in Iran now, and what society is like, and then you look back in the 70s and you realize, before, was it 1979 or was it 72, 79? Iran was arguably a pretty progressive country. Yeah, no, I can't find it. Luckily, you're not seeing most of these. Here it is. Right, okay, there we go. Okay, let's get rid of Goose there. So, this is 1970s Iran before the Islamic regime, and you're thinking, well, that looks like France or whatever. And yeah, these sort of videos, they're about, aren't they? But there was then the kind of coup. They got rid of the Shah, and it all went a bit south, and it kind of got hijacked, the regime change there, and yeah, and we are where we are now. Anyway, sorry about that. Just I thought I'd find that video for you. Would be amazing for Iran to become more secular. The 79 revolution, used and liquidated the secular Democrats left. Yeah, it just got hijacked, didn't it? And it could have ended up, going one way, but it ended up going the other. But all I've read indicates it's still a minority that supports Islamic Republic. I think there's probably, there have been these growing protests, and there is a real appetite for regime change from probably more people in Iran than you'd think. But when you have like morality police and whatnot, such a tight grip on society, then it's very difficult for people to show their discontent. But there's probably a lot more discontent there than you would realize. But then there's also been this issue. There will have been this issue over the last few days of rally around a flag where on the one hand you hate your government, but on the other hand the whole world seems to be against you, or Israel is against you, and so you rally around your government because you've got a greater. I've often talked about, in fact I wrote an article on this once about how, you know, we're so divided in the world. What we really need is an attack by aliens. If you get an attack by aliens, we'll all like get together and it's a bit like Independence Day, isn't it, or the film. You know, Bill Pullman, wasn't it, and Will Smith. So yeah, if we were attacked by aliens, we'd all get together and be, you know, unified. And I think, you know, that's what's happening maybe in Iran at the moment, where they'll all unify against a common enemy, and that common enemy at the moment is Israel, but also they're probably throwing the United States as well. Thank you for your hard work. I'm a Texan and an independent. Besides my wife, I am alone on an island. Texas is that state that every election cycle they're like, it's going to be a purple state. It's a purple state. It could well flip this time. It could well flip, and then oh no, it didn't. And it's like, it's not. In fact, Florida's even less so. So that's gone from being a purple state to just being a solid red state. But Texas. Colin Elred I thought he had a bit of a shot in the last election, but in the end it wasn't to be. But it would be nice because Ted Cruz, let's face it, there are some options there, and yeah, it's like I've said before though, a lot of the division. Okay, rewind, Pierce. You get the urban-rural divide, where urban centers are much more likely in the United States to be Democrats, and rural areas are much more likely to be Republican. And Texas is a really good example of that, where you got Austin in Texas, which is particularly Democratic. Although there's been this slight change as well in Texas, because it's been all the tech bros have been attracting these kind of manosphere type people to go down. I don't know if that's really affected the voting demographics, but you know, Austin, Texas was much more liberal. I don't know if that kind of they were taking, like Musk took factories away from California because it was too liberal, and then brought them to Texas in the hope that, you know, he would get a more politically aligned landscape for him in Texas. But anyway, I'm just waffling on now, but Texas is just a pretty interesting place, and I often hope, being kind of more of a lefty, as you would know, I would hope that Texas did change. It needs a bit of a change, just, you know, let's, you know, mess things up there a little bit, politically speaking. But anyway, I'm alone on an island. These people cannot be saved. They're brainwashed. Okay, well, maybe it won't change it. Yeah. Good luck. Goose. Anecdotally, it's always been my impression that there's no Islamic theocracy more pro-Western at the roots than Iran. It's an advanced society. Yeah, and it is interesting, because it's got that background, and it's got a lot of oil money. You know, one thing about, say, Afghanistan is that Afghanistan has no natural resources, really, apart from opium, apart from poppy. And that means it's always going to be, you know, rural and poor, and that those kind of places are really ripe for religion. Like, we can get into the demographics of religiosity here, but it is if you look at the countries in the world that are least religious. Sorry, I'm going to go off on one now, but I think this is really interesting topic. The countries that are least religious in the world are the Nordic countries, and one of the prevailing theories of why they're the least religious in the world is because they have the greatest existential security, which means that, you know, there's no violence comparatively. They're not a war. It's not violent. These are safe countries. You know, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark. These are safe countries. And they also have really high trust in their institutions, and those institutions are beneficial to the individuals that live in the country because it's all part of a secure welfare state, and a welfare state is, it's a high tax burden, but you get what you pay for. And if you lose your job, you do not lose your house and your family and food and whatnot, because the welfare state will help you out, and you've got that net to look after you. What that then means is that you're never like walking along this existential wire. I forget the word. Trapeze, or no, whatever. You're never walking along that wire, and one problematic move of the foot one way or the other leads to you falling to your death. You're just comfortably walking in eider-down. Obviously not, things can be very difficult for people wherever you live, but essentially, if you have existential security, you have no need for God. So this is where you start, you need to understand the psychology of religion, which is fascinating. It's not like, it's really interesting when you look around the world, like, people believe more in God there than there, and this type of God there, and you realize that actually all these patterns mean that, there are causes going on around here, and actually there's a lot of psychology and a lot of politics and a lot of sociology going on that leads to these belief systems being more prevalent here than they are there. And somewhere like Afghanistan, it is difficult to live there. It is, poor, low education, all of these things, and you've got low education because you don't have decent taxes to pay for decent welfare and so on. And so it's all connected. And so someone like Afghanistan is always going to struggle. You could pour gazillions into Afghanistan, but you make it very difficult for it to sustain itself, because it's just a very difficult place to have, I think, comfortable existence. And that means it's ripe for belief in God, because where do you get your hope from? You can't rely on the government. You can't rely on having decent job and comfortable income all the time, and then a welfare state and a good education. And so places like that generally have a much higher belief in God. If you look at the Global Peace Index, the Global Peace Index rates how violent and how dangerous countries are, and the most religious countries are the countries that are lowest on the Global Peace Index. There's no coincidence. These things are all linked. I'm not trying to say this as an atheist, trying to say, these are just, you look at the data. There's really good, one of my two really good books, both, one's entirely by Phil Zuckerberg and the other is co-authored by him, talk about, I won't bore you with it. Anyway, go and check out, I interviewed Phil Zuckerberg on my other channel, A Tippling Philosopher. If you want to go and check that out, he's a sociologist of religion. He's absolutely fascinating. But Iran. Sorry, to get back to what the actual question was, Goose, because I'm just going off on one. Sorry, this is just me banging on endlessly. Iran, I think, because it has a lot more natural resources it can pull on, particularly had a more equitable society, probably, even under the Shah it wasn't particularly equitable, but it had and it also had the influence of empires as well, interfering in it, British Empire and the French, and etc. So I think it has possibly more of a chance to move from being a theocracy to a secular state, more so than maybe some other places around the world. Linda, thank you so much for your great kindness there. That is really super generous. I do appreciate that. Goose, again, if things start to get unstable with Iran, watch out for Azerbaijan. There's up to 25 million ethnic Azeris in northern Iran, and no love lost between them. Yeah, and I was listening to Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell talking about, that's a region to watch out for. Your Azerbaijans and your Kazakhstans, and I don't know enough about them, but there's a lot of focus on that kind of area from China, and then you've got places like the UK just recently doing a military deal, signing a military deal with I think Kazakhstan, wasn't it? and that annoying the Russians because the Russians have been heavily involved in there, and you've got the French quite involved around there as well, and then the Americans, no doubt, thinking, well, it's a zero-sum game in this kind of situation where if we don't get involved with kind of influencing that area, then it'll be the Chinese, and so I think there is quite a geopolitical game of chess going on in that entire region. Sorry, Rough Riders are playing. Man must have priorities. Have fun, all, says Michael Vuchar. So thank you, Michael. That's very kind of you to pop in, though. Shout out from Linda. Thank you, mods, for all the work you do. Yes, it's much appreciated by the community. Thank you, mods. All the people that moderate the conversations. Thank you. There have been a few videos recently, and thank you very much, Linda, by the way. Again, been a few conversations, a few videos I've done recently where suddenly I've been hit by a whole bunch of trolls. There was a couple on my sort of Iranian ones because if you do something that's quite different and you attract some new viewers, suddenly trolls get a kind of some new trolls end up joining, and you end up having some interesting conversations. So there have been a few videos recently where trolls and bots seem to have played a more of a leading role. So thank you to the mods who do things about that. I do appreciate you. Anyway, that is probably enough from me. Just mainly banging on about things that just pop into my head when people ask me questions. Just goodness me, there have been so many comments in the live to the side. Yes, so it's interesting that Saudi Arabia is helping Israel and the US since Iran is a threat to their kingdom. Other Arab states are neutral or allied with Israel too. I don't know enough about this area, but I think it's fascinating that, with the whole Gaza thing and Palestine, there are the neighboring nations like Egypt and Saudi Arabia don't want to know. They don't want to have any of the Palestinians there causing issues. And you've got different kind of Islamic denominations possibly being an issue. But obviously, with regard to Saudi Arabia and Iran, you've got Sunni Muslims and Shia Muslims. That is going to play a major part. And the whole normalization was with Israel was doing really well until Israel started being really hardcore against Palestine, and it seemed to upset the apple cart there. So it's going to be interesting to see how those other nations, Saudi Arabia, I know that Jordan allowed their airspace to be used in defending against the drones and ballistic missiles sent from Iran to Israel. And I'm fairly sure Saudi Arabia did something as well. But Iraq were moaning because they were claiming Israel was using their airspace. And, Iraq's not been a fan of Iran for some time, but there may be, a bit more of a connection there these days. And it's a whole crazy. That's why I said it's a crazy day live stream. There's the whole world. There's a tightrope. That's a word. Thank you. Wire, that thin wire thing that you walk a tightrope. I told you I am struggling to find words at the moment. You can tell because I'm just super tired. But if I didn't talk about this stuff tonight and show you a load of the tabs and whatnot, then I never would, and that would just annoy me. But yes, thank you, Cheryl, for helping me out with my lack of word recognition. Can't even think of the word selection. Goose, one last one, JP. But if you want to go down a good Wikipedia rabbit hole, look up Pan-Turkic nationalism. It's hours of wholesome fun. I was reading about, if this is right, Turkic nationalism to some degree. I was reading about Erdogan. There's in one of my New Humanist magazines, they had a whole long read on Erdogan and his history and Turkic nationalism with regard to the context of Turkey and Erdogan. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything I can add to that. But thank you, Goose. Very kind. Because there's a secular nation that still is technically secular, but is becoming. It's quite similar to the United States. Technically a secular nation, but much more religious than you would imagine for a secular nation. And in fact, you have this weird situation where the US is a secular nation, but is way more religious than the UK, which is a religious nation, as in our head of state is the head of Church of England, the King. And we have bishops sitting in the House of Lords. I think 28, 29 bishops have a seat. And I think that's bad. They have, they are some ring-fenced seats in the House of Lords, which I don't think is cool. But yeah, so we're a religious nation, effectively, but we are not religious at all compared to the United States. If you look at the British sort of attitude survey and whatnot, so we're below 50% now. So very different from the United States, it has to be said. Anyway. Wow. So, okay, we've got Shyster Hobbit here saying, JP, your wrong belief systems are a fundamental manifestation of revenue stream generation, mate. Throughout history, Tacker 47 has appointed his own religious grifter. Look at Paula White. Yeah, don't get me started on Paula White. Goodness me. She, if you go and watch videos of Paula White talking tongues, glossolalia, as it's called, it is, I always get a bit of cringe watching people do the old talking in tongues. It's so utterly un-British. Like, it's not something we generally do. So just to remind you, there is a fundraiser at the moment. It is linked below, atpgeo.com/donate. I think Benny Pye put it in the live thread as well. It would really be great if you can help out with that. I need to check into that, see how we're getting on. But that is a Car for Ukraine stopgap before we do a Jiggers Poor fundraiser, I think next month. But yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. I don't know that I've got anything else to add. Cheryl, thank you very much, Cheryl, for being on board. I couldn't remember what taco stood for today at the protest. Trump always cops out, couldn't come up with chickens out. I feel you, JP. I'm helpless without Google. Good old Google. Yes, it's probably not being helped by. I had a couple of gins earlier with my partner as we were watching a film, and then she's gone to bed. And I thought, right, I better just exercise the nuggets from my head, so to speak. So that's why I'm here with you guys. Adam Bennett, enjoy your tea in the morning. Thank you. I enjoy my tea at all times of the day and nights. Some of these people are like, oh, I don't drink caffeine just before I go to bed. I don't drink tea or coffee before I go to bed. I'm like, I could drink a vat of tea and I'll still sleep. It's not a problem. Come on, Michael. I've just arrived. What's happening? Where have you been? Where have you been all my life? Now, put a question mark at the end of that therapy statement, Thomas Patton, and you get a good band. Scream Major by Therapy is an absolute chef's kiss of a song. Anyway, that's enough of me. Thank you very much, all of you. You're all wonderful, wonderful people. I really appreciate you. Thank you for indulging me. We've gone through a number of topics. There was one more video I wanted to show you. Let's just this is one of my famous long goodbyes, isn't it? Oh, where is it? No, it's gone. Oh, I had it lined up. I just wanted to show you. Most of you will have seen this, but it was from the Su-25 that either its wing fell off or it was shot down by its wingman the other day. And there's now an image of it taken from a drone as it hit the ground. The pilot had already ejected, so that it's not showing the death of anyone or anything like that. Let's just find it. It will be here. Sorry, you're not going to enjoy seeing all this flash past. But anyway, I just want to show you this. Here it is. So here's a video. I need to be here somewhere. So this is the Su-25 that whose wing fell off or was shot by the other Su-25, and that is quite some footage. Incredible. Anyway, I don't think they're going to be repairing that particularly easily. But wow, it's quite. This war is incredible, isn't it? Like, we are seeing so much of this war. I was absolutely flabbergasted that MAGA influencer Gunter Eagleman said this morning that, my goodness, we've seen so much footage in 2 days of the Iran war, but we've seen nothing about what's happened for the last 2 years in Ukraine. It makes you think blah 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 and all conspiracy theories and what have you. And you're like, dude, what do you mean? I think there's more footage of this war than you can poke a hairy stick at. It's just insane. Anyway, there you go. I just thought I would show you that video. It was pretty impressive. Things blowing up, I guess, can be quite impressive. Right, okay. That's enough. Too much pop and rambling now. Yes, this is absolutely true. I must go. Long goodbye. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon. Really appreciate your support. I'll be back with you tomorrow morning. How early it will be, I cannot say. Probably not as early as I try to be, as I want to be. But anyway, Toodle Pips. All the best. Hurrah for now.